I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And welcome back to Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
It is week 4 of our anniversary month, where we're doing films that are reaching a anniversary year ending in either a 0 or a 5. I selected my year, 1997, for the sole purpose of finding an excuse to show Jackie Brown to Rob, because I've been wanting to show this to him for a long time. We literally just finished watching it. First thoughts for me.
This was great. I really enjoyed this. I'm not a huge Quentin Tarantino fan. He seems to be kind of hit and miss for me. But when he misses so bad that I'm hesitant to want to delve into other of his stuff.
And then you're principally talking about the Kill Bill movies, right? That's what you told me you did not care for those, or
Not at all. And there was one other that I didn't like that I can't remember off the top of my head. But occasionally one of his really works for me. And this worked.
yeah. And
I mean, I guess what I was getting at was I
Okay.
had the opportunity to do Reservoir Dogs, and I skipped it because it was Quentin Tarantino, and not knowing enough about him, I didn't want to. I didn't want to do Reservoir Dogs.
But you and I both absolutely adored Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yes, but you like Kill Bill.
No, not really. I don't hate Kill Bill like you do, but I think it's okay.
Hate's a strong word for how I feel about it, but I didn't enjoy it.
I thought it was okay. This movie was my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie before Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I can see why.
What are some of your thoughts as to why I would like this and why this movie works where some of his others do not?
Well, first of all, let me ask you a question. When did you first see this?
I first saw this, I think before I was blogging. I can't remember. I first saw it in 2009. It's the handy thing for having a blog with
Yes.
movies you've seen.
Especially when you're consistent, unlike someone else.
Yeah.
What was your question to me?
So what did you like about it, and what about it worked for you that maybe didn't? That
Just
sets it apart for some of the others.
So the characters in this one just work.
They're great.
And one of the issues with Quentin Tarantino is he has a tendency to overplay his violence. He doesn't in this one.
No.
In fact, there's minimal violence in this. In fact, I think this might have the least amount of violence of a Quentin Tarantino film that I've seen.
I also don't think there's any nudity in it.
No, I can't think of any. Yeah.
There's a sex scene, but it's not one that has nudity in it.
Well, I guess technically you see her butt
Yeah.
cheeks. But, yeah. No, the characters work. Like, that's when Quentin Tarantino is at his best, it's when his characters are really strong. And he's not relying on other things to accomplish the purpose of the film. And I feel like Kill Bill, he was relying on the artificial violence.
Yeah. Well, that's what those films were about. Was kind of a pastiche.
But you don't have to overplay it in that way.
Well, one of the reasons, and the reason this film works, and I like Quentin Tarantino quite a lot, but I think the reason this works so well for me is because it is the least Quentin Tarantino film.
Okay.
Because it is the only Quentin Tarantino directed movie that is not based on an original story by Quentin Tarantino. He is adapting a
Elmore
Leonard novel called Rum Punch, which he made some changes to, most noticeably in the lead Jackie Brown, because the character in the novel is white, and she's black here because Quentin Tarantino, being a lover of exploitation films of the 70s, wanted to make a Pam Grier film. And he did. This is a Pam Grier film in the lineage,
And Pam
but
Grier
more
looks-
sophisticated.
Yeah, and she looks great. So we haven't discussed it on the podcast, but I recently have watched some Steven Seagal movies, and he had her in a film from 1992, and she doesn't look anywhere near this good in that movie. In fact, I was like, it was almost offensive how he makes her look in that film. She looks nothing like what people would assume Pam Grier would look like, and in this she looks good. She's dressed very well. The wardrobe for this just really is fitting for her and things like that. But yeah.
Do we want to try to... I mean, the plot is actually kind of complicated, so I wouldn't want you to try to explain it, because that's...
I think I could actually
That's part of kind of the joy of the film.
Is the twists and
the
turns?
The twist, yes.
Yeah.
But in short, the plot of the film is what?
Well, the IMDb plot synopsis says a flight attendant with a criminal past gets nabbed by the ATF for smuggling. Under pressure to become an informant against the drug dealer she works for, she must find a way to secure her future without getting killed, which is a misnomer because it's not a drug dealer.
Yeah, that's true. He's a gun runner.
But we have Pam Grier as Jackie Brown, our primary lead. You have Samuel L. Jackson, whose character is Ordell Robbie, but it might as well have just been Samuel L. Jackson. You have Robert Forster as Max Cherry. And then you have Bridget Fonda as Melanie, Michael Keaton as Ray Nicolette, Robert De Niro as Luis Gara. You have Michael Bowen as Mark Dargis and Chris Tucker as Beaumont Livingston. I think that's really all we need to hit on. I don't know that we even need to hit on Winston.
Yeah, and there's a nice little cameo bit for Sid Haig as the judge early in the film, who actually reduces the amount of the bail bond for Jackie Brown to lower than the prosecution wanted, which is fun because they were so at odds in the numerous films they made together in the 1970s. Him always trying to get her and never succeeding.
Yeah.
Basically, Jackie Brown is caught coming back from she works for an airline that flies down to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico and back. It's
Cabo Air.
Very low rent airline. And she has been smuggling money for the gun runner, Samuel L. Jackson, and is apprehended. And eventually she agrees to work with the feds to trap him, but she's playing many sides against the middle in what turns into a caper film with a money drop thing at a mall that they do a wonderful... We see it from her perspective, and then we drop back and we see it from the pickup people's perspective, and then we see it from Max Cherry's perspective. And it's just wonderful. It's got a great energy to it. It's got a great build to it. The characters are fun. You've got a lot of long talking sequences that are as entertaining as any action sequence could be.
I realized we should mention one other character, who is Simone, played by Hattie Winston, who is the only person in this movie who possibly really escapes unscathed or with nothing, nothing else against her.
Dude.
So,
I do want to talk about the various members of the cast, and then I guess we can talk about certain plot elements or scenes. So, of course, Pam Grier, as we've already said, she's great. This film was built around her or adapted for her. It's one of, if not probably her greatest role. Because she homages things that she had done in the past, but with a sophistication that they didn't have, because Quentin Tarantino is an auteur of bad films, and he makes them into good films.
Yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson gives a wonderfully Samuel L. Jackson performance in this with the language, and he's that character is great. He's fun to watch.
And even homages to other lines that he has in other movies.
But he's a two-bit hood. He's a small-timer that has these grandiose ideas of himself. And it's fun to watch him. And fun to watch him when he's on top of the world. And fun to watch him when he's struggling. And just the ego he has and the confidence he has, earned or not earned, and the way that she plays him quite effectively through this film.
Yeah, well, she plays everyone effectively throughout this film.
I want to definitely talk about Robert Forster. What do you think of when you think of Robert Forster, or how familiar are you with him?
I'm not super familiar with him. He's, in terms of my repertoire with him, he's mostly smaller parts. Like this, I think this might be the movie I've seen where he has the largest part of any movie I've seen him in.
And Mr. Foster passed away just in 2019. This is the greatest part he's ever given. This is the great Robert Forster role. It reignited interest in him. His career had been floundering. I mean, it didn't do for him what Pulp Fiction did for John Travolta, but it definitely helped his career. And it is a great performance by a mediocre actor. Where Quentin Tarantino is good at finding that spot for actors a little further down the totem pole that allows them to excel, to reach the
Well, and he really sells this role.
He
He's
sells the
100%
role. I mean,
believable.
and he's wonderful in it. And that scene where he goes, so Samuel L. Jackson uses him as a bail bondsman at first for the ill-fated Chris Tucker, and then to spring Jackie Brown with probably the intent to kill her, and then she outsmarts him and then gets him involved in this double-cross, triple-cross situation. And he goes to pick her up, Robert Forster does, and sees her and is instantly smitten. And you can see a few times in this film the way he looks at her. He just adores her. She turns him on to the Delphonics. He decides, well, maybe I don't want to be bail bondsman anymore. It's like it's a transformative relationship, even in the very brief period.
Do you think he understands everything that she's roped him into up until the moment that he has Ordell shot?
There's a good question, because it's played in such a way that you can interpret it a number of ways, as you can with the ambiguous ending. I'm always like, I like an ambiguous. I mean, they resolve the main thing, but the do these two get together thing is left ambiguous, and I like that. So you can imagine your own ending. But I want to circle back a bit to the idea of a great performance by a mediocre actor. And so there are a number of films in this category for me where an actor is not a great range, is able to give everything he can give. And so I would rank this along with Ronald Reagan in King's Row and Burt Reynolds in Boogie Nights.
Okay.
They're not great actors, they're likable actors, and it just gets to an essence of what they can be. And you know, Foster continued to work. He had several films come out after he died, because he worked pretty steady.
Well, this is also his second appearance on the podcast this year.
Yes, because he's very briefly in Mulholland Drive. And I did mention when we watched that we'd be seeing him again later this year, because I had that in mind. Also in the film, of course, we have Bridget Fonda, who is daughter of Peter Fonda and granddaughter of Henry Fonda. She was an actress principally in the 90s, and then she bowed out of filmmaking, and she married the composer Danny Elfman.
Oh, okay.
And they had at least one child, and she is apparently very seldom seen in public. Because every once in a while, the tabloids get a picture of her, and she's, as I like to say, she's aged like a normal human being.
Okay.
So she's not, she's quite beautiful in this, but also
plays in
kind
a
of low
likable
rent,
character.
and she has her fun moments, and the way they dispatch her in this. But I mean, were you surprised?
Yes and no. Like, would I have seen this coming prior to them arriving at the mall? No. The way the mall scene is played?
Yeah.
No, not at all surprised.
Because her and
Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro's character have some kind of a past, a brief acquaintance, and you don't find out about that until they're left alone when Samuel L. Jackson goes off to have a meeting with Jackie Brown. And they've been having conversations, but they've not been acknowledging that they know each other because they didn't want Samuel L. Jackson to pick up on it. But they'd had some kind of relationship in the past. They resume that relationship on kind of the down low, but very quickly get disillusioned with each other. And she just harps on him, and he cannot take it. Like she makes these comments like, how are you a bank robber? It's like, well, we know how he was caught, because he's impulsive and not the brightest guy. And the thing I really love about the performance is how quiet he is. I love that. And sometimes quiet, you're hiding a very active inner life. Not the case with this character. There's not a lot going on upstairs. He's not a complete idiot, but he's not a bright bulb.
Yeah. You could also just describe him as someone who has served time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That would make sense that he would be
more subdued.
Yeah. And as we meet him
but
at the beginning
also
of the film, he's just a couple days, about 4 days out of prison when and he hooks up with Samuel Jackson, who he had served some time with and done stuff together in Detroit like 20 years earlier. Michael Keaton is an unexpected choice for a Quentin Tarantino film. What did you think of his part?
Well, I mean, it's a role that works for Michael Keaton. Yeah.
He's a good cop. He's not the best cop, but he's an honest cop. He's got a little bit of an ego.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets the sense that something's not quite right with Jackie, but he just can't quite
Place
figure
it
out.
or prove it, or yeah.
It's like it's just this sense, but he can't. It's like there's only so much he can do without anything.
It does certainly come across as though at some point he figures out that he's being played, but it's also ambiguous as to whether or not he realized that he's getting played twice.
Yeah.
Or technically 3 times, but
one great thing about this film is there's a real sense of threat. Like you're not, and that's true of Quentin Tarantino. You don't know who's going to make it out alive.
yeah.
Like, you can be pretty confident Jackie Brown is because she's the title character, but there's certain
I also never
moments-
had a doubt that Max Cherry was going to make it.
Yeah, but there's like Samuel Jackson is an intimidating guy. Like he's full of himself, and he's not the brightest, but he is legit dangerous. And
Yeah.
he kills 3 people over the course of this film. He kills Chris Tucker, and then he kills Robert De Niro, and I guess Robert De Niro kills Bridget Fonda. So
Yeah.
that's. But I think they make a. They talk
he's
about
been
linking
connected
him
to the 3
3.
murders.
Yeah. So there was, I think you mentioned her earlier, the lady who kind of comes out. I think we're talking about the same person. The lady from Georgia, Simone. Is that the? What's her story? And because Samuel Jackson switches the pickup, so they do a dry run with smuggling $10,000 out, and that's what they're trying.
Well, but that's to hook the ATF.
Hook the ATF because they're trying to sell the ATF on the idea that we can help you
Get his money.
get his money and
get him
for smuggling the money. But they're really more interested in getting him for the guns. But they'll settle for getting him for the money. And they use this not very bright young black woman from the South who appears to have a serious
Well, she's
drug
not
problem.
Simone, but yeah. Simone's the one that takes the bag from her. You're thinking of Sharonda, played by Lisa Gay Hamilton.
Yeah. So Sharonda's an interesting character. And so Samuel Jackson was going to have Sharonda do the second pickup as well, and then changes it last minute for Bridget Fonda. And tells Jackie Brown that Sharonda ran away with his money.
No, Simone ran away
with his money.
So
You're right.
because at the first drop, they have practiced having a second person to take the bag. So Sharonda meets Pam Grier,
Okay.
or Sharonda meets Jackie Brown, and they make the exchange, but Simone is sitting there. So they have worked out that they can make this swap. And Simone has taken the initial $10,000, which the ATF is going to let go just because they were trying to prove that she could make the exchange. So Simone takes the initial $10,000 and just straight up disappears. And so now that's why they have to suddenly insert Melanie as the pickup girl and leave Sharonda out of it, you know. And so that's when they switch to Melanie and Lewis making the pickup. And, you know, they're getting played, and so that gets blown. And Lewis gets fed up with Melanie and shoots her. And then they have to figure out what's gone wrong.
Yeah, and what's funny is because she is needling him because he gets lost going out of the ball.
Well, he gets disoriented in the store.
Yeah.
So he gets lost going out of the store. Then he gets out of the mall, and he's lost trying to find his car. And, yeah.
And she keeps needling him, and he just snaps and shoots her twice. That conversation when he picks up Samuel Jackson, who was at the nudie bar, waiting so that he had like an alibi. It's like, well, there was something. It's like, where's so and so? Well, there was something.
You didn't leave her there, did you?
Well, no, not really. I shot her. You shot her? Why'd you shoot her? I mean, that's just a fun. I mean, the dialogue in these movies are just wonderful, and the character interactions are, you know, they're so much of what.
Well, and I'm kind of curious. So I've added the Elmore Leonard book to my to-read list. I'm curious to read the book and see how much of this is Quentin Tarantino dialogue and how much of this is Elmore Leonard, because
they both have a sense of dialogue.
Elmore Leonard is great. And one of the questions I was going to ask, and this may not be the best time, we may, you know, bump it back down the road. Do you have a favorite Elmore Leonard novel?
I really haven't read much. I've audiobooked a couple.
Didn't you read 310 to Yuma? Did I buy that as a physical book, or did I buy the ebook?
I haven't read it, no.
Okay. Because we've watched both versions of that movie. 310 to Yuma was a good book. I've read several of his Raylan Givens, which was then turned into the Justified series.
I've listened to one of those, and I've listened to one or two standalones.
And then he wrote a book called Djibouti, which has great dialogue kind of like this.
For some reason, Jackie Brown has a mug that she gives to Robert Forster, or I forget which one of the two use it, but it has Albania on it. And I just think that's an interesting, like, what's the story of why this character has an Albania mug?
Because she's a stewardess.
Yeah, I guess so. But
and she previously worked for Delta.
Yeah, back in the day, that's got to be it.
Yeah.
That's just kind of a weird, random thing. And then another thing in it that wasn't a thing when you watched it originally, or would have watched it in 1997, but is endearing now, is the 90s. This film came out in 97, but specifically set in the summer of 1995. I don't know why they decided to do that, but they mentioned the date, and when Robert Forster is leaving the Mall movie theater the first time, he appears to be coming out of the movie The American President, the Aaron Sorkin film. You see the poster. But he goes to buy the Delphonics cassette, and you have those racks of cassettes, which just brings me back. You have the various references to beepers and how complicated the beepers to dial this number and then dial that number. And where Robert De Niro is playing with the phone cord. He gets kind of tangled in the phone cord at Bridget Fonda's house. And then I mentioned to you as we were watching where they're having the conversation about records, and Robert Forster said, but you can't get new stuff on records. And I'm like, it's funny that was true in 1997, but 25 years later is not.
Yeah.
So in 1952 and 2022, you could get new stuff on records, but midway between those points, you couldn't. Yeah. 1972 as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess it is time for some trivia.
Sure, can do. Do you want to do box office or trivia first?
Let's just box office first. It did quite well.
I had not looked at this before now. It had an estimated budget of $12 million, which is a little bit lower than I would have expected.
Given the star power of the thing.
It had an opening weekend of $9.2 million, a domestic gross of $39 million, and I'm not seeing an accurate worldwide gross.
Since we're going to go slightly out of order, I'm just going to say the Rotten Tomatoes rating on this thing is 87%, with a 7.5 stars on IMDb.
You ready for some trivia?
Yeah.
From IMDb. Quentin Tarantino met Robert Forster in a restaurant and handed him the script for this movie, saying, "You're going to do this, and that's all there is to it." Forster was naturally thrilled, having had a major career slump. This film saw him come back in a big way, even landing an Oscar nomination.
Yeah, deserved.
Yeah. When Pam Grier walked in to audition for Quentin Tarantino, quote, "There were all my posters from 20 years ago when I was just a piss and vinegar kid," she recalled. And I said, "Did you put these up because I was coming over?" And he said, "No, I was going to take them down because you were coming over." The scene when Max and Jackie talk, and Max discusses that he had done work to his hair to make him look more youthful, was suggested by Robert Forster. Forster had had such surgery when his hairline began to disappear and thought it fit the character. Tarantino was delighted that Forster was willing to openly discuss the procedure and immediately wrote it into the screenplay.
Oh.
Quentin Tarantino was afraid that Elmore Leonard would hate the film. He and Roger Avery hesitated to discuss the changes with Leonard, finally speaking with Leonard as the film was about to start shooting. Leonard loved the screenplay, considering it not only the best of the 26 screen adaptations of his novels and short stories, but also stating that it was possibly the best screenplay he had ever read.
Wow. High praise.
Yeah. Pam Grier had screen tested for the part in Pulp Fiction that eventually went to Rosanna Arquette. Quentin Tarantino didn't forget her, however, crafting the part of Jackie Brown specifically for her. Pam Grier didn't expect her longtime friend Sid Haig to play the judge. She burst out laughing as she was surprised by Haig, since they had starred together in several exploitation films by which this film style was influenced. In the first mall scene, Max Cherry is seen exiting a movie theater while the music for the ending credits is playing. This is, in fact, the closing music for the film itself.
Oh. Meta.
According to Quentin Tarantino, Michael Keaton desperately tried to talk Tarantino out of hiring him for the role of Ray Nicolette. His whole process was to convince me that he was not right for the role, recalled Tarantino, but he never quite convinced me. Michael's whole thing is to deny himself and say he's not right. Robert Forster didn't even have an agent when Quentin Tarantino handed him the script.
Oh.
First, Forster had auditioned for the Lawrence Tierney part in Reservoir Dogs in 1992. So Tarantino had written the part of Max Cherry specifically for him.
I remember there was an interview or something. They were talking to Quentin Tarantino about who are actors that have passed away that you would have loved to work with. And he instantly said Lee Van Cleef. It's like, I have some definite ideas for Lee Van Cleef. And I'm curious about what that story is in his mind, the Lee Van Cleef movie he wished he could make.
Yeah. Alternate casting for Max Cherry role.
Ooh.
Any guesses?
Something out of the box.
No.
Oh, no, something very obvious.
Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro.
When Robert De Niro first got a hold of the script, he wanted to play the role of Max Cherry. Quentin Tarantino wanted to work with De Niro, but had his heart set on Max Forster as Cherry, so he gave the role of Lewis to De Niro.
Okay. I think that would have worked, actually.
I don't know if he would have played it quite as straight.
Yeah, De Niro, yeah, you're right. You wouldn't have gotten
especially like that last scene in the car with Ordell.
Yeah.
De Niro wouldn't have played it that straight.
And one thing, and De Niro's perfectly capable of doing this in films, but when you look at Robert Forster's face at a number of points, you see him thinking.
Yeah.
And there's some wonderfully subtle stuff he does in this.
Yeah. Can you pick out a role reprisal from this film?
Ooh. I'm probably going to kick myself when you tell me what it is.
Michael Keaton reprised his role as Ray Nicolette in Out of Sight from 1998, also based on a novel by Elmore Leonard.
Oh, they exist in the same universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to see Out of Sight.
The white 1980 Honda Civic, which Jackie Pam Grier drives, is the same car that Butch, played by Bruce Willis, was driving when he knocked down Marcellus Wallace, Ving Rhames, in Pulp Fiction from 1994. Given how badly Butch crashed after knocking down Marcellus, it's nothing short of amazing that the car wasn't a write-off. Samuel L. Jackson, notorious for saying mother in his R-rated films, says it 37 times. As of 2018, it holds the record for the number of times he'd said it in any given single movie he's in. Quentin Tarantino was apparently upset that Pam Grier didn't receive an Oscar nomination. The music used in the mall where Jackie comes out of the dressing room, frantically looking around for the undercover cops, is the same as was used in the chase scene in Coffee, 1973, where Pam Grier's title character is running away from the cops.
So that's one of the interesting things about Quentin Tarantino is up until he was able to get a very elderly Ennio Morricone to do some original stuff for The Hateful Eight, he would just take musical cues from other movies and put them together for the soundtrack of his films. In addition to which, the actual musical soundtrack, the pop songs and stuff in this film, are very strong. That opening sequence of Across 110th Street, where we're just following Pam Grier in basically silhouette on one of those people movers at the mall, going past a kind of a tacky background at the airport. That's just a wonderful, it starts the film with this great energy. Yeah. And then you've got the fonts and everything are kind of vintage. That song, Across 110th Street, is a hit from Bobby Womack that was also the title song of a film by that name, Across 110th Street from 1972, which is a kind of exploitive frenemy cop drama with Yaphet Kotto and Anthony Quinn.
Of Quentin Tarantino's films that have received Oscar award nominations, this is the only one not to win at least one award.
Oh.
Alternate casting for Lewis.
Okay.
Any guesses?
No.
Sylvester Stallone wanted to play the part.
Okay, I can see that.
Alternate casting for Ray Nicolette.
Surprised me.
John Travolta.
Okay.
Robert De Niro and Quentin Tarantino reportedly did not get along on set.
Oh.
This probably had something to do with De Niro not being given much to do by Tarantino. Regarding playing Louis Gara, who said very little, intended to mumble in his early scenes, but gradually came out of himself as the film progressed. The casting director's name?
Jackie Brown, I noticed that. Spelled a little differently.
Spike Lee criticized Tarantino for the frequent use of the N-word in the film. Samuel L. Jackson, previously a frequent Lee collaborator, defended Tarantino in the press. Miramax chairman Harvey Weinstein called Lee in an attempt to mediate between him and Tarantino, but Lee refused to speak with Tarantino. But I would say that Jackson and Lee have since made up. They're good friends, but I think that is plenty of trivia. Speaking of the Oscar Award nomination for this film, its only nomination was for Best Actor in a Supporting Role. Yeah, you mentioned this has an IMDb aggregate rating of 75, and its Rotten Tomatoes was
84, I think I said.
I think you said 87,
87,
I believe.
yeah. High 80s.
Which leads me to, how would you rate this film?
I love this film. It is 4 stars, 10 out of 10.
I'm not quite that high on it. I would give this 8 out of 10. And I would give this 3.5.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And I think part of it
It's strong, it's enjoyable, it's fun.
And you know, I've seen this around half a dozen times. And so it's a film that I think I was talking to you the other day about Jaws, where Jaws is a film that's always like at the same level every time you see it. And most films can't do that, and Jackie Brown can't quite do that. So it's not the experience the first time, but that's what I hold on to, and I still think it is super strong.
Oh, it is quite strong.
Like, everything is so intricately put together. Like, he gets everything right.
I'm assuming
there's nothing wrong with this movie.
I'm assuming that at least your first 2 or 3 watches of this, you probably pick up on more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a marker of a solid film. So, I mean, there's not much to criticize in this. It is a rated R film, which is not, if you know Quentin Tarantino, you're not at all surprised.
Yeah, I don't think there's a Quentin Tarantino film that's not rated R.
But it's enjoyable, and if you're tolerant of language in a rated R film, this is an easy recommendation.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Now we got to rank some. Of course,
yes,
we already
I was going to say that is
know.
kind of the unenviable task.
This is a tough month.
This was an extremely strong month. In fact, I'm not sure that we've had a month on the podcast where the films have consistently had a higher rating. The 4 titles?
Do you want to? Okay, the 4 titles, in order that we watched them, was 1982's Fast Times at Ridgemont High, 1987 Wings of Desire, 92 Bad Lieutenant, and 1997 Jackie Brown.
I want you to go first.
Well, we already know number 1, because we had discussed this as soon as we saw it. Number 1 is Wings of Desire. It's an absolute masterpiece. I would put Jackie Brown at number 2. It's a great film. Number 3, I'm going to go with Bad Lieutenant, which is, the more I think about it, the more impressed I am with it. Which surprises me, because that leaves Fast Time at Ridgemont High, which could be a number 1 in another month, at the number 4 slot.
Our rankings,
and I think it's the same.
Our rankings are identical.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. This was a fun month, and as much fun as we had with Fast Times at Ridgemont High, I was a little surprised, to come into this conversation right now, going, well, you know what? That's the bottom of the list.
Yeah, and it's still great.
Yeah.
It's still a really good film. And I had noticed, or I hadn't planned this, but the through line between my 2 films is they have long mall scenes. So we witnessed.
You have a fascination with malls, so that's
the
appropriate.
golden age of the mall, 82 through 97.
Yeah.
Over the course of this month.
Yeah. As we discussed a little bit earlier tonight, I felt a need to redeem myself this month. Mm-hmm. I have a history of, in months when I have 2 picks, of being kind of hit and miss. Mm-hmm. Usually one is strong and I take a flyer on the other. I felt like I needed to be a little stronger this month. I was going to take a chance on a flyer, but I mixed up the years, which was probably for our benefit.
Well, what was it going to be?
Harry and the Hendersons.
Oh, Harry and the Hendersons. Okay. Well, that's a fun film.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that before.
But that would not have been, wouldn't have fit as strongly, I presume, as the movies we did watch.
You really surprised me with Wings of Desire. I don't think I've ever been more surprised by your selection of the film.
You weren't equally surprised by The Exorcist?
No. The Exorcist doesn't surprise me. It's not
Wings
as
of Desire wasn't even on your radar for a selection for me.
No. I hadn't even thought that you would consider something for him. I figured we would be getting a comedy or an action film or a conventional drama.
No, I did my research. Yeah, I really tried to do some research. I didn't want to go... I was going to go with something really obvious for 92 in...
A League of Their Own.
Yes. But once you watched that and it was eliminated, then I was like, okay, let's dig a little deeper. And because Bad Lieutenant wasn't a blatantly obvious choice for 1992.
It was set up because we did mention after we watched Bad Lieutenant Port of Call that you were interested in that, and I know that you saw it and talked to me about it shortly after. But I guess both selections were a little off the beaten path for you, and I did appreciate it.
But 1987, I did quite a bit of research, and after researching 1987 films and wanting to start with something strong, I felt quite confident that Wings of Desire was going to be a safe bet. Of course, we had previously done City of Angels, so it also was, again, from that standpoint, a easy choice. Right. So,
they were both kind of callback selections to things we've seen previously.
Which, again, also made them feel like safe choices. But we both, after watching City of Angels, had mentioned a desire to see Wings of Desire. And yeah, I mean, I'm really pleased with Wings of Desire. I was far more excited to show you Wings of Desire than Bad Lieutenant. Yeah. I thought there was a chance you wouldn't enjoy Bad Lieutenant, but I felt like Wings of Desire was pretty safe. And I was grinning for 2 days before showing it to you, and I grinned for at least 2 days afterwards.
And obviously, Jackie Brown was kind of an obvious choice for me once you thought
once I understood it, yeah.
Fast Times was a little off the beaten path, but I think I had mentioned before to you that was a film I quite enjoyed.
Yeah.
So we had a very strong month. We plan on doing something similar next year, doing a 5 and 0
I think it'll probably be a regular...
Yeah, I think that might be what we replace the mystery month with.
Yeah. It seems like a really easy thing to do, so yeah, it gives you so much range. Yeah, so if there's nothing else, I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
You didn't talk to her? How can you talk to her?
You know what I did notice?
Okay.
Max Cherry still never washed his hands.
It's possible.
That last one?
Oh, yeah.
So at the beginning of the movie, Samuel L. Jackson comes in and comes out of the bathroom and he goes, "You wash your hands or anything?" You remember that?
Yeah.
So at the very end, when she's sitting in the lobby, he flushes the toilet and walks out and never washed his hands. Still never washed his hands. Maybe I'm ruining something.
No, I think I probably...
Like subconsciously.
If I did, but I forgot. Yeah. And you still want to like Max that I don't want to believe he wouldn't wash his hands after he used the toilet. But that adds a little extra something to the character.
Well, it's a character flaw I could overlook.
Yeah, it is. But
yeah.
Let me double check that real quick, just in the off chance that I did see it post December 2015.
15, you mean?
Or 2005.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna have to bleep this one. Super strong month. I genuinely am not sure we've had a stronger month.
Yeah.
So.
And they were pretty diverse.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Mystery Pack Month, but without the duds.
Yeah. I still kind of want to do a Mystery Pack Month at some point again, but I kind of want to do it just as that shake the phone thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, that worked out okay. Like, for Love of the Game.
Yeah,
like,
Love
that
of the Game was good. I'm glad I saw that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, this was fun. I enjoyed this. I'll have to revisit this again at some point.
Yeah.
And, yeah. But yeah, it's easy to see why you like it. It's easy to see, yeah. I think the only question that you asked that I missed was you asked me at one point why I thought you liked this movie.
Okay.
Or were interested in this movie. And I assume it has to do with some connection to Pam Grier.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I first I think it was in the build-up to... I could probably look it up. One moment here. Trusty blog.
This only has a Metacritic score of 64.
That's wrong. 2007, I watched Coffee and Foxy Brown. They were being shown on TCM's underground thing they did on the weekends. And this dates the technology. I just shoved the VHS tape in, and I had it record those movies. And this was either shortly before or shortly after Grindhouse. I think shortly after, which was the Robert Rodriguez Quentin Tarantino double feature, which was the first Quentin Tarantino film I saw in the theater. And I didn't know really that much about exploitation films. That was kind of my gateway into them, and because of just it happened to be that they were showing these Pam Grier films on TCM, that's more or less why I started with them, and instantly liked Pam Grier.
Yeah. Fun. You got a advertisement for us? Maybe something for Cherry Bale Bonds? No, yeah.